I never thought my life would take such a painful and unexpected turn that day. It was supposed to be an ordinary celebration, a simple, cheerful gathering for my nephew's 8th birthday. My family had planned a small party at my parents' house, and everyone was expected to attend. The day started off as most family events do, with mild chaos. Kids running around, last-minute errands, and my mom on the phone constantly, managing every detail as though it was a royal gala. Since I was coming from work, I told my mom I'd be a little late. Her response was as predictable as always. "Why can't you plan better? You're always late for everything." The comment stung, but I brushed it off. I had a habit of picking my battles with my mom carefully, knowing full well that arguing with her would lead to unnecessary drama. I didn't want to ruin my nephew's big day. On my way to the party, I stopped at a store to pick up a last-minute gift. My nephew loved action figures, and I had spotted one he'd been wanting for months. It was a small gesture, but I knew it would light up his face. The store was just 5 minutes out of the way, so I thought, why not? I'd still make it to the party on time. But fate had other plans for me. As I pulled out of the parking lot and drove down the main road, I noticed the light ahead of me turn green. It was a quiet street with little traffic, so I didn't think much of it. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a car barreled through the intersection, ignoring its red light. I barely had time to react. The other driver's car slammed into mine with such force that the world seemed to flip upside down. The sound of metal crunching against metal was deafening, and the violent jolt sent me reeling. My airbags deployed instantly, the powdery smell mixing with the acrid scent of smoke and burnt rubber. For a moment, everything went black. When I regained consciousness, my car was an unrecognizable wreck. My ears were ringing, and the pain in my leg was unbearable. The driver who had hit me, a man who reeked of alcohol, was staggering around, slurring apologies to no one in particular. I later found out that he had been over twice the legal alcohol limit. Paramedics arrived quickly, extracting me from the car with care. The pain was sharp and unrelenting, and every movement felt like agony. They told me I had likely broken my leg and suffered some minor internal injuries. But I was alive. That was supposed to be the silver lining. But the nightmare didn't end there. From the ambulance, I called my mom to let her know what had happened. It took a few rings before she picked up, her voice already exasperated. "Where are you? Everyone's here waiting for you. I told you not to be late." I tried to explain, my voice trembling from pain and shock. "Mom, I was in an accident. A drunk driver hit me. I'm on my way to the hospital." There was a pause, but instead of concern or panic, her response left me stunned. "How could you let this happen? Do you have any idea how much you've disrupted everything? It's your nephew's birthday." I couldn't believe my ears. "Mom, I didn't let anything happen. Someone hit me. I'm hurt." She sighed heavily, as though I were a child throwing a tantrum. "Well, now your nephew is upset because you're not here. Do you know how much he's been looking forward to this? You've completely ruined the day for him." Her words hit harder than the accident itself. I was lying on a stretcher, in immense pain, barely holding myself together, and my mom's primary concern was how my accident had inconvenienced the party. As I was wheeled into the hospital, I hung up, unable to deal with her selfishness any longer. But the nightmare was far from over. Once I arrived at the hospital, I learned that my injuries were serious but not life-threatening. My leg was broken in 2 places and would require surgery. The doctor explained that I would also need several months of physical therapy to recover fully. It was devastating to hear, but I reminded myself that I was lucky to be alive. I tried calling my dad next, hoping for a better response. His voice was calmer, but it carried the same undertone of disappointment. "Your mother's upset," he began, as if that was my fault too. "You know how much planning she put into today. The least you could have done was be careful on the road." Be careful? I wanted to scream. How could they possibly think this was my fault? Did they think I chose to be hit by a drunk driver? That I wanted to be lying in a hospital bed, my car totaled, My life upended? By the time the party ended, not a single member of my family had come to check on me at the hospital. I spent the night alone, replaying their words in my head. Their complete lack of empathy left me feeling abandoned and betrayed. When I was discharged a few days later, I went home to rest and recover. My parents eventually called to check in, but their tone was far from apologetic. Instead, they doubled down on their stance, saying that while they were glad I was okay, I should have been more responsible. "You could have caused a scene at the party," my mom said. "It's a good thing you weren't there to ruin the mood." That was the final straw. Their words shattered any illusion I had about my family's support. I realized that their concern wasn't for my well-being. It was for appearances. They cared more about a party than their own child. After hearing my parents' dismissive words, something inside me snapped. I'd always known they had a knack for prioritizing others over me, especially my brother and his family. But this was a new low. I decided it was time to put some distance between us, physically and emotionally. For the next couple of weeks, I focused on recovering from the accident. Between physical therapy sessions and doctor appointments, I had plenty of time to reflect on my relationship with my family. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. My parents had always gone above and beyond for my brother, Ryan. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Ryan was charming and successful, and he'd married a woman my parents adored. They had 2 kids, including my nephew, whose party I had supposedly ruined. Meanwhile, I was treated like an afterthought. Even before the accident, I had felt the imbalance. Ryan's achievements were celebrated with lavish dinners and heartfelt toasts, while mine were acknowledged with a quick, "That's nice, dear." He got the biggest slice of the proverbial pie, and I was expected to scrape by on crumbs. But this time, they had gone too far, blaming me for a drunk driver hitting my car, for nearly losing my life. It was beyond cruel. It was dehumanizing. One evening, as I sat on my couch scrolling through old photos, my phone buzzed. It was my grandfather, Jack. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his voice warm and comforting. Grandpa Jack was the one person in my family who had always been in my corner. He had a quiet strength about him and a way of making you feel heard, even in a family full of people who talked over each other. "I heard about the accident," he said. "How are you holding up?" Hearing genuine concern from someone in my family nearly brought me to tears. I told him everything: the crash, the hospital, and, most painfully, my parents' reaction. Grandpa listened quietly, letting me vent without interruption. When I was finished, he sighed heavily. "Your parents have their heads so far up their own." "Well, he said, making me laugh despite myself. "They've always had blinders on when it comes to you. It's not fair, and it's not right." His words felt like a balm on an open wound. For the first time since the accident, I felt validated. A week later, Grandpa Jack called again, but this time he had a proposition. "How would you feel about spending some time at my beach house?" he asked. The beach house. It was legendary in our family. Grandpa had bought it decades ago, and it had become a cherished retreat for him and Grandma. After she passed, he rarely went there, but he always spoke about it with a sense of reverence. "I've been thinking about selling it," he continued. "But before I do, I want you to have it for a while. It's yours to use however you like." I was stunned. The beach house wasn't just a property. It was a symbol of peace and freedom. It was the one place where I could escape the suffocating weight of my family's expectations and judgments. "But why me?" I asked. "Because you need it," he said simply. "And because I want to show your parents what it means to truly support someone." The idea made me smile. Grandpa Jack wasn't just giving me a gift. He was sending a message. A few days later, I packed my bags and headed to the beach house. The drive was long, but as soon as I arrived, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The house was perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean, with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the view perfectly. The salty breeze and the sound of waves crashing against the rocks were exactly what I needed to clear my head. Over the next few weeks, I settled into a routine. Mornings were spent sipping coffee on the deck, watching the sunrise. Afternoons were for physical therapy and long walks along the shore. In the evenings, I cooked simple meals and read books by the fire. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. But peace didn't last long. Word of my stay at the beach house quickly spread through the family grapevine. My parents, predictably, were furious. How could you accept such a gift without telling us? My mom fumed over the phone. That house is part of the family legacy. It's Grandpa's house, I reminded her. He can do whatever he wants with it. Well, it's selfish of you to keep it all to yourself, she shot back. Your brother's kids would love to spend time there. Don't you think they deserve it more than you? The audacity of her words left me speechless. Once again, my needs and feelings were being dismissed in favor of Ryan and his family. Mom, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, I was almost killed in that accident. Grandpa gave me the house because he thought I needed a break. I don't owe anyone an explanation, but my parents weren't the only ones with opinions. Ryan called me a few days later, his tone dripping with entitlement. Hey, I heard you're staying at Grandpa's beach house, he said. That's cool, but don't you think it's a bit much? I mean, we've been wanting to take the kids there for years. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Ryan, I just got out of the hospital. I'm recovering from a major accident. Can you give me a break? Yeah, but it's not fair to the rest of us, he said. You're not the only one in the family, you know. At that moment, I realized something important. My family would never change. No matter how much I tried to explain myself, they would always find a way to make me the villain. But this time, I wasn't going to let them win. It didn't take long for the resentment from my parents and Ryan to morph into a full-blown family drama. My mother had made it her personal mission to guilt me into relinquishing the beach house. Every call from her began the same way. A sigh, followed by some version of, asterisk, you know, it would really mean a lot to your nephew if he could spend a weekend there. Asterisk. At first, I tried to explain my side calmly. I reminded her that Grandpa had given me the house to heal and recharge, but my words fell on deaf ears. To her, I was being selfish, immature, and petty. Then, she tried a different tactic, mobilizing Ryan. One evening, as I was sitting on the deck watching the sun dip below the horizon, my phone buzzed. It was Ryan again, and this time, he wasn't even trying to sound reasonable. Look, I don't know what kind of spell you've cast on Grandpa, he said, his voice brimming with annoyance. But it's not fair that you're hogging the beach house. Mom and Dad are really upset about this, and frankly, so am I. Ryan, I said, trying to stay calm, the house isn't yours. It isn't Mom and Dad's either. It's Grandpa's. He gave it to me because I needed it. Why is that so hard for you to understand? Because you don't need it, he shot back. You're just using it to get back at us for something. If you had any decency, you'd let the whole family enjoy it. Instead, you're acting like a spoiled brat. I bit my tongue, refusing to give him the reaction he clearly wanted. Ryan, I'm done with this conversation. Good night. I hung up before he could respond, but the encounter left me shaken. No matter how much distance I put between us, my family's toxicity had a way of seeping back into my life. The next day, I called Grandpa to vent. They're relentless, I said, pacing the living room. Ryan thinks I'm hogging the house, and Mom is making me feel like I'm stealing candy from a baby. I don't know how much more of this I can take. Grandpa listened patiently, then chuckled softly. You know, he said, I think it's time I taught them a lesson they'll never forget. What do you mean? I asked, intrigued. I've been thinking about this for a while, he said. Your parents and Ryan have always had a skewed sense of fairness. They take, and when someone sets a boundary, they act like it's the end of the world. It's high time they learn what it feels like to be on the receiving end of their own behavior. I wasn't entirely sure what Grandpa had in mind, but I trusted him. If anyone could put my family in their place, it was him. The first sign of Grandpa's plan came a week later, in the form of a family group text. "Hi, everyone," Grandpa wrote. "I've decided to make some changes to the family estate plan. I'll be holding a meeting at the beach house next weekend to discuss the details. Attendance is mandatory." The message sent shockwaves through the family. My parents immediately began speculating about what the changes could mean, and Ryan was convinced it had something to do with the beach house. "Do you think he's giving it to me?" Ryan texted in the group chat, as if the idea were a foregone conclusion. "I hope so," my mom replied. "That place has always been meant for the whole family, not just one person." I stayed silent, watching the conversation unfold like a spectator at a drama-filled play. Whatever Grandpa had planned, I knew it would be worth the wait. The following weekend, the family descended upon the beach house like a swarm of locusts. My parents, Ryan, his wife, and their 2 kids arrived early, making themselves at home as if they already owned the place. My mom immediately started rearranging furniture, and Ryan's kids began running around, leaving sticky fingerprints on everything. Grandpa arrived shortly after, his presence commanding the room. He was carrying a thick folder, which he placed on the coffee table with deliberate care. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his tone calm but authoritative. "I've been thinking a lot about the future of this family and how to ensure that everyone is treated fairly. That's why I've decided to make some changes to my estate plan." My parents exchanged nervous glances, and Ryan sat up straighter, clearly eager to hear how he would benefit. "I realized," Grandpa continued, "that fairness isn't about giving everyone the same thing. It's about giving people what they need and deserve. And frankly, some of you have been taking more than your fair share for far too long." The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Grandpa opened the folder and pulled out a stack of documents. "Effective immediately," he said, "the beach house will be transferred to Daniel. It's no longer part of the family estate." My mom gasped audibly, and Ryan looked like he'd been slapped. "But, Dad," my mom began, her voice trembling. "What about the rest of us? What about the kids?" Grandpa held up a hand, silencing her. "I'm not finished. Daniel has been treated unfairly by this family for years. The constant dismissiveness, the lack of support, it ends now. This beach house is my way of making things right." He turned to me, his expression softening. "You deserve a place where you can heal and find peace, without anyone making you feel guilty for it. And I trust you'll take good care of it." Tears welled up in my eyes. For the first time, someone in my family was standing up for me in a meaningful way. The fallout was immediate. My parents accused Grandpa of playing favorites, and Ryan stormed out of the house, muttering something about family betrayal. But Grandpa didn't back down. "This isn't about favoritism," he said firmly. "It's about accountability. Maybe if you spent less time trying to tear Daniel down and more time supporting them, things would be different." As the family drama unfolded, I realized something important. This wasn't just about the beach house. It was about finally breaking free from the toxic dynamics that had defined my life for so long. I thanked Grandpa profusely for his support, and he gave me a knowing smile. "You've earned it, kiddo," he said. "Now go live your life on your terms." The aftermath of Grandpa's decision was like a ripple turning into a tsunami. My family's reaction ranged from explosive anger to icy silence. But through it all, one thing became crystal clear. Grandpa's stand had shifted the family dynamics in a way I never thought possible. In the days following the meeting, I received an avalanche of calls and texts. Some were outright accusations, while others were thinly veiled attempts to guilt-trip me. From my mom, "Asterisk, do you really think you deserve this? After all we've done for you." Asterisk, from Ryan, "Asterisk, this is disgusting. You manipulated Grandpa, and now you're tearing the family apart." Asterisk, but Grandpa had armed me with both his wisdom and his courage. Instead of letting their words crush me, I found myself standing taller, more confident. To my mom, I replied, Asterisk, Mom, this isn't about deserving or not deserving. It's about Grandpa wanting to support me in a way that no one else has. If you can't see that, then maybe it's time to reevaluate your priorities. Asterisk. To Ryan, I said, Asterisk, I didn't manipulate anyone. Grandpa made his choice because he saw the way I was being treated. If you feel torn apart, maybe you should think about why that is. Asterisk. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking on eggshells around them. I wasn't shrinking myself to avoid conflict, and it felt incredible. Meanwhile, Grandpa wasn't done teaching lessons. He took it upon himself to have a one-on-one conversation with both my parents and Ryan. What he said to them, I'll never know in full detail, but it must have struck a chord. My mom called me a week later, her tone softer, almost hesitant. I've been thinking, she began, about what Dad said, and maybe I haven't always been the most supportive. I guess I didn't know how to handle things when you were hurt. It was easier to blame you than to face the reality of how scared I was. I was stunned. This was the first time she'd ever admitted to being wrong. Mom, I said, carefully choosing my words, I appreciate you saying that. But this isn't just about the accident. It's about how I felt overlooked for years. I need you to understand that. There was a long pause before she finally replied, I'm trying. I really am. It wasn't a full apology, but it was a start. Ryan, however, was another story. He doubled down on his belief that I had stolen the beach house from the family, and he made it his mission to make me the villain in every family gathering. Even when Grandpa shut him down with a sharp, Ryan enough, he refused to let it go. At first, I let his bitterness roll off my back. But when he began spreading lies about me to extended relatives, I knew I had to draw the line. At the next family gathering, I stood up in front of everyone, my voice steady and clear. I'm tired of being painted as a bad guy, I began. Grandpa gave me the beach house because he saw something none of you were willing to see, that I've been struggling, and instead of helping, you've been tearing me down. I won't let anyone, not even family, take away the peace I've worked so hard to find. If you can't accept that, then maybe it's time we all take a step back. The room fell silent. Ryan looked furious, but he didn't say a word. Grandpa, sitting in his usual spot by the fireplace, gave me a proud nod. Over time, the family tension began to ease, though not entirely. My mom started making more of an effort to repair our relationship, and even my dad, who had always been more passive in family matters, reached out to apologize. I didn't realize how much you were going through, he said one afternoon. I guess I was so focused on keeping the peace that I didn't see the cracks in the foundation. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a step in the right direction. Ryan, on the other hand, remained distant. He couldn't get past his resentment, and I eventually realized that it wasn't my responsibility to fix that. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt, and that's okay. As for me, the beach house became more than just a sanctuary. It became a symbol of my newfound strength and independence. I started hosting close friends there, filling the space with laughter and joy instead of guilt and conflict. I also began volunteering at a local recovery center, sharing my story with others who had been through traumatic experiences. It was therapeutic not just for me, but for those who needed to hear that it's possible to reclaim your life, even when it feels like the odds are stacked against you. One day, while sitting on the deck with Grandpa, watching the waves roll in, I turned to him and said, I don't think I can ever thank you enough for what you did. He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. You don't need to thank me, he said. You just need to promise me one thing, that you'll never let anyone make you feel small again. I promise, I said, meaning every word. Looking back, the accident that had upended my life turned out to be the catalyst for something greater. It forced me to confront not just my family's toxic dynamics, but also my own fears and insecurities. And in the process, I learned one of life's most important lessons, Sometimes. Standing up for yourself means walking away from those who refuse to respect you, even if they're family. The beach house wasn't just a gift from Grandpa. It was a lifeline, a reminder that I deserved peace, happiness, and a place to call my own. And now, every time I sit on that deck, feeling the sea breeze on my face, I'm reminded of just how far I've come.